I had to like really rewire my brain from that. You know, the political world and my job really rewarded like not just like quick thinking, but like sound bites. Not just do you have a response, but can you give a really good response and one that simultaneously shuts down the other side and makes you look good, you know? And I got pretty good at it. And that actually makes me feel very sad now because of what the cost of that is to my soul.
Hi, and welcome to episode 3 of the Lives I've Lived podcast. Today's episode is a rich conversation between me and my good friend, Steph Krider. Steph shares about her time working in government for the state of Ohio and the direction her life is now going because of the lessons and insights she gained during those years. It's a great conversation about being true to yourself, navigating our currently highly polarized culture, and bringing your whole self into everything you do, especially the things that you are passionate about and want to advocate for. I really hope you enjoy this episode. Oh, Steph!
Hi!
Hi! Thank you so much for coming over to my house.
It is a joy.
Oh,
A place where I can just paint my toenails and then sit here for an hour and talk to you.
Love that. I'm glad you feel comfortable enough to go for it.
Me too.
First off, you and your family, your husband and beautiful girls, have been so sweet in just allowing me to like be a part of your guys' lives.
Aww.
And it just means so much. Like, as a lot of people know, when I moved to Columbus, I didn't know anybody. And so when I met you guys, you were just so welcoming, and I'm just so grateful for your friendship because I feel like you're those friends that I can just go be myself, like on your couch. And like,
yeah,
that's like one of the most healing relationships I feel like you can have is with people that you can just, you don't have to like put anything out there other than just like being there.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, you guys have been such a gift to me. And
well, I'm so glad to hear that.
I love you.
You are also a gift to us. And I also want to say, because I am from an immigrant family, we've adopted so many people into like my family of origin. Like that was how we lived. We just adopted people into our family. And so like, that's how my whole life has been. That's how my parents raised me. And it's such a gift.
So in the scope of life, I come to find that it just seems like we all kind of live these like micro lives in between, like in amongst this one big life that we get to live. How many lives do you feel like you've lived?
Oh gosh, at least 3, but possibly 4 or 5. I think.
Can you give us a snapshot of like, what does life look like for you in this season?
Yeah. Life is so strange for me in this season because I don't really have like words to just anchor who I am. So like if I meet someone right now and introduce myself, you know, I have for a long time tried to avoid defining people by their work. And so I often don't ask even what people do. Because I want to know other things about people. And
let's pause here because I love that. But like, how do you practically do that? Like, how do you find good ways to talk about yourself or people that you love, like outside of just their job?
Yeah, it's so sometimes it's really fun and sometimes it's kind of awkward because people are just used to like a normal script. Like, hi, how are you? Great. My name is this. This is what I do, you know? So sometimes it is really like people are so thrown by it. They don't know what to do. But like when I'm introducing friends at parties, I never use their profession unless I'm like, oh, you're both this really specific thing, you know? So it would matter. But I like to be like, oh, hey, like so-and-so, this is my friend so-and-so, and you guys both really like space. And they'll be like,
outer space?
Yeah. That is an actual example I'm using of how I introduced 2 friends. And then they talked about SpaceX.
Oh, yeah.
They talked about SpaceX for like...
That's hilarious.
30 minutes. And I was
love
like,
that.
Great. Yeah. And like, that was their conversation, you know? So I don't know. It's just more fun to kind of pull people out of their shell. And, like, get them to know substantial things about each other.
Right. You know what that tells me about you is that, one, that's just an incredibly intentional thing to do. And I'm sure after a while it becomes habit. But it also tells me that you have to know something of substance about someone else to share that.
Yeah.
That's like really cool.
Oh, thanks. I mean, sometimes it's way more simple than that.
Sure.
Like, I'll meet someone at a party and then I'll be like, oh, hey, other friend, I just met this person and they spilled their drink. That's how our conversation starts.
That's amazing.
But it's a great way to start a conversation, you know?
Yeah.
Like, I don't care if you're Kevin from accounting. Great. Like, I don't know anything about accounting.
That's amazing.
This conversation has nowhere to go.
That is so funny. Okay, well, we went on tangent because I really wanted to hear about that. Mm-hmm. But telling us about your snapshot, you don't really want to just like define yourself or others by their occupation. So like, how do you describe the season you're in?
Oh, yeah. Such a good question. I feel like I still am like struggling with it and like struggling to decide if I'm like comfortable with the season I'm in. But I intentionally also have been trying to just practice like humility. And so like, I don't apologize for the fact that I don't have a job title to use. I just let it sit there. And so people are like, oh, what do you do? And I'm like, well, I do a lot of stuff. Like we own rental properties and I help manage our Airbnb and we have 3 kids and they're all in school. So I'm constantly taking them places. And also I run this ministry at church for moms and babies and I don't get paid for any of those things. It's usually just where I leave it. And then people are like, oh, okay, you sound busy. And I'm like, I am really busy. And also I have lots of space for fun in my life, I feel like at the moment. So that really is a gift.
In this American society, especially, so much of our identity is put in our job. I mean, we're taught when we're very young to, dream big, but that big dream is how you're going to make money. And so for someone who does a lot of things, but doesn't get paid for any of it, has it ever been a conflict for you to be like, yeah, but like I'm not making money? I don't know. Does that?
Yeah, I feel like that's where like the insecurity kind of creeps in, where it's just like, well, but am I like being a productive member of society if I'm like not working and contributing to something else? And but I also like today I helped a friend move who didn't have anyone else to help her, and like I wouldn't have been able to do that if I had to be at work between the hours of 12 and 5,
Yeah.
And so I really felt like, oh, I'm so glad I can go help her do this thing, And there's also this piece that's like, if I were at work from 9 to 5, which I've spent a lot of my life doing, then my kids also wouldn't get to be a part of a lot of the things I get to do, know? So if it's like a ministry thing, like a lot of the time I'm just like, guys, you have to come with me. And sometimes they'll be like, ugh, and they don't want to do it. But a lot of the time they're like, oh. And then they'll ask me 100 questions about the person we just met or, their kids and where they're living and all these really great things that I'm so glad I get to talk about with my kids,
Yeah.
So there's so many ways where it's like, this time is precious and I should never wish it away, especially with my kids and just getting to raise them. Like that does not go unnoticed by me. Like I'm grateful for that.
That's really cool.
Constantly.
Yeah. This is a note for me for later. Would you rather go by Steph or Stephanie?
I am indifferent. This was not really intentional to me, but I feel like in the last 4 years since I stopped working, everyone just calls me Steph Krider now. But professionally, I've always gone by Stephanie Ronaday Krider.
I saw that.
Yes.
That's why I was curious.
Yeah.
Can you tell me more about your middle name?
Yeah. So my dad was from India. And when he came to this country in the late 1970s, he started pronouncing his last name as Renati because that's like the more American way to say it.
Okay.
And one of my favorite things actually was growing up, like in elementary school, if we had a sub and they had to call roll, they'd always get to my last name and they'd always say it wrong. And literally like 5 kids would be like, it's Renati every time. And that's like a really fun memory for me.
That's amazing.
I know. It just made me feel really loved.
Yeah.
So anyway, when my sister got to college, she was like, I am taking back Ronaday because that is how we say this. And she was like, I'm going to college. No one knows me. I'm just going to start calling myself Elizabeth Ronaday now. And so I just did the same thing.
Okay.
And so all these people I know from like my childhood and from high school are like still say Renati if they say my maiden name for some reason.
Yeah.
And I say Ronaday. And now my last name's really Krider. So.
So your dad just kind of decided, because Americans can't say it's Renati.
Yeah. And like it was the late 70s and I wouldn't have like pinpointed that as a time of a lot of discrimination towards immigrants in particular, but it was. And so he was a physician. He had to do like his residency over again here, but also like to get a job. He wanted to sound more American.
Whoa.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
In 1978 or whatever, 76. I don't know.
Wow.
Yeah. But he told me all the time he would like apply for hospital jobs and it would say like immigrants need not apply.
Whoa.
Isn't that crazy?
Yes. So we talked a little bit earlier. You told me that you wanted to change the world from a young age.
Yes.
Can you tell me about that?
Yeah. There's a few things I'll have to say about that. One is I've talked a lot about my parents. It's funny. I love my mom, loved my dad. He passed away very young. We'll talk about that later too. But my dad was a doctor and my mom was a nurse, and my dad was an immigrant to this country. My mom grew up in rural Pennsylvania. And so I think just their backgrounds and their professions really inform this. But like my sister and I both have like come into our lives knowing like we have a responsibility to care for other people. And like service is just a thing that we were brought up to do. And so I always believed like I could do anything like in the name of serving others and taking care of problems that we're facing, And so by the time I graduated from college, I was like convinced I was going to work for the United Nations. And I don't know what exactly I thought I was going to do, but I was going to change the world. Dang it.
Yeah.
Like I was going to fix some stuff.
Yeah.
That was wrong, but I did not work for the UN, which I don't regret now.
Well, let's talk about that. How old were you when you wanted to work for it?
Like when I was graduating college. So 22.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you weren't like 12 years old being like, the UN, man, that's what I want to be. Or like, were you already thinking about it like at a really young age?
Oh, that's such a good question. I don't know. I remember saying for a time, like I wanted to be the president. And then I was like, well, maybe I'll just be a doctor.
I legit would vote for you, but that's another conversation.
Well, yeah. I'll save all my commentary on that. Then I was like, oh, maybe I'll be a doctor, but I cannot. I'm not good with blood. So that went right out the window.
No.
Yes. And then I thought that I might do journalism.
Okay.
Because truth is like really important to me.
Yeah.
And making truth known feels important. And so when I went into college, actually, that was the major I planned on, was doing journalism. And then I more or less stumbled into international studies, which is basically like political science, but internationally.
Okay.
And then I got really excited about like, I mean, there's so many possibilities, and this was like the early 2000s. So at that time, everyone was really passionate about saving Darfur, which maybe people will remember. I don't know. That's a real niche thing. But that was like a big issue. George Bush was president. So, I mean, Afghanistan was a big issue. Like, I don't know. There were just lots of places in the world where it was like, oh, America's going to go help all these places and people. And I was like, I'm on board. Like, I'll do it,
Yeah.
Some of that has not aged super well. So that's all right, So here we are. But I just really thought I would like go work for the UN and like move to one of those countries and like maybe even do foreign service or something like that.
And then towards the end of college, your dad got sick?
Yeah. So my dad was sick like the first half of my senior year. He was like diagnosed with cancer. He had throat cancer. And so I had planned a study abroad trip actually that winter, which I ended up not going on. And he was upset with me about that. But I was like, no, I don't think I want to be away. Like, and his prognosis was never good from the beginning, but like he just wasn't doing well with treatment and things. So I was like, no, I think I'm going to stay. And then I graduated from Ohio State like the beginning of June of that year, and he passed away on the 4th of July that same summer. So it was like an abrupt, I mean, he'd been sick, but I think I just didn't totally realize that it was going to go like that quickly.
Yeah.
And so that just really changed the trajectory of everything I had planned.
Yeah.
That was a really hard summer. I mean, obviously, because I was grieving my dad and dealing with that. I had this pressure because I was like, okay, I graduated college. I'm only on my parents' health insurance for 3 more months because that was how it worked then. Like I have to find a full-time job.
Yeah. And
my best friend at the time, who'd been my roommate in school, took a job with AmeriCorps and was moving to New York City. And so she moved like the middle of July, I think. My sister, who I'm really close with, also went to Georgetown to get her master's. And so she left like the beginning of August that same year. And then Jeff, who was then my boyfriend, but is now my husband, did a study abroad program that same summer and went to Australia.
I didn't know that.
I know. He was also gone for like 8 weeks that summer.
So like everyone was leaving.
Everyone close to me was gone.
Wow.
And it was so terrible.
Yeah.
Like I am certain I was like depressed, but I never went to see a doctor or anything like that. I did go to counseling for a time, which was helpful. But it was just like what grief is, like going through the motions of your day and just feeling, terrible, but still having to go to work and take care of the things you have to take care of. And so it was just really hard. But like moving to another country was definitely out of the question for me.
Yeah.
At that moment.
Right. You're like, everyone is going and I'm going to stay.
Yeah. And it felt important for me to stay where I was. Like it was like, this is too fresh and too much. And
how did that begin to like shape your life view?
I think I just was like, well, I mean, life just keeps going, and I guess you do get to make a choice. Like, do you keep going or not? But it didn't really feel like a choice. It was just like, oh, I just keep waking up every day.
Yeah.
So I guess I'll just be sad and wake up every day. Mm-hmm. And then over time, as grief does, it just sort of like moved a little further back in my mind each day, you know? So it was like, okay, there's like lots of moments of my day that I enjoyed and I don't feel like crying all the hours of the day,
Yeah.
And so you just kind of can feel that like as you progress. And I guess I'm using that tense because maybe someone needs to hear that if they're moving through grief right now. Just keep going. It's the best you can do. And so I just was like, well, I got to find a job. I got to keep working the job I have, which was like in retail, and embrace the friends who are here. And the friends I had here took care of me that summer. Like, they still got me to come out and do things. And I still was talking to other people and, wasn't just doing what I would have preferred to do, which is sit and be sad and wear sweatpants. Yeah. So I ended up finding a job that fall. My sister had worked for the Ohio House of Representatives, so the legislative body of Ohio government. And she was like, well, I can get you an interview. Do you want to just like interview for it? And I was like, yeah, I guess it's fine. It's a job. So I went in, did the interview and got the job. And I was like, okay, I guess this is a thing I'm going to do now.
Now I work for the government.
Now I work for the state of Ohio, I guess, which was like a real learning curve for me. There's lots of things I can say about working in government, but
well, like tell me more. Like what?
All the like so many of the stereotypes are true. There's a way that things are done, and that is the way that they are done. And you can ask all the questions you want, but it's still the way the things are done.
Yeah.
Which, especially when you have the energy of a 22-year-old,
sure,
is like it feels like banging your head against a wall.
Yeah.
Like I see that this is the way that you've always done the things, but what if we did this? And then just being told no over and over.
Do you think that will ever change?
Yeah, I mean, it's not so.
And I don't just mean in government, because I know that's even in like businesses and stuff.
Yeah.
People who've been there for 20, 30, 40 years are like, this is how we've always done it.
Yeah, I think, I mean, in the private sector, when it doesn't change because those businesses ultimately fail. like, sorry, Kmart. Like you did things the same way and now you're gone.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
I mean, I don't know the specific issues Kmart had, but you know, like I did love the Kmart by our house when I was a kid. You know, like that's how you see it, I guess, in the private sector when it doesn't change. Like that's what happens inevitably. But government is different because like it, in a way, can't fail, you know? And so it just keeps going.
Yeah.
I think the refreshing thing is when you work for someone who has a position of power or influence in government and they decide that that is not acceptable, then they have the ability to make things different. And I have had the privilege to work for some people like that. And I'm super grateful for that because otherwise I would be a very disillusioned human.
Yeah.
Having just kept up that same ethos, you know?
Yeah. I know not that much about government, but I worked seasonally, like between Alaska and Washington. And I used to work for our county. It is called King County in Seattle. It's just the largest county in Washington. And I would work in the like
the call center?
Yeah. Like the call center. Because at that time that I started working there, we had just moved to all vote by mail, like 0 polling places.
Yes.
Only vote by mail.
Love that.
So lots of people were calling in, like, especially, you know, and of course they try to do the best that they can. And this is nonpartisan. It has nothing to do with either party.
Like a function of government.
Yes, exactly. And it was a doozy that first year because so many people would call and be like, I just went to the school that I've gone to for 30 years and nobody was there. And we're like, well, did you get anything in the mail? And they're like, what are you talking about? So it was a transition for the people of King County, but we got there.
Yeah.
And I don't know why everyone's not vote by mail.
I agree.
I don't know about 0 polling places because accessibility, but I loved being able to vote by mail in Washington. So I think it should be.
So one of the things I've done in government is work for the Secretary of State who administers elections in the state of Ohio. And I know way more than I would ever really care to about how elections function. But at the same time, I'm so glad I have that knowledge because I think there's so much distrust, which I mean, you know, we could talk all day about why that is, but like it's almost all, I guess I have to give the caveat, unfounded. Like it's incredible how America does elections. And it's like incredible.
Yeah.
Like that Washington can just do what they want to do. And they can be like, we're all going to vote by mail. And that's what you do. Yeah. And that's how it's run. And then Washington does great.
Exactly. And then I would sit by a buddy and we would look at your ballot, make sure you filled in all your little bubbles appropriately.
Gosh, you did that?
I did that. And if it was like all jacked up and ripped up because your cat like ate it, then we'd have to get a fresh one in together, you know, make sure that we filled the bubbles in right. But if it was perfectly good, we'd put it in the good pile and then we'd put it in through the machines. The machines would count them up. And
oh, people, hear this message. People like that. That is who are processing your ballots. Yeah. And it is a trustworthy system.
It is. So all that to say, that is my extent, really, of government knowledge. And I really love hearing not only just stories, but like knowledge from you in your experience. Like just the other day we were at a wedding and our friend was telling us about like these zoning issues that they were having for their house. And you're like, well, did you talk to like your representative of that district? And I'm like, who does that? Nobody does that. But like, we could.
Yes,
like,
should.
You should inform the people.
Yeah.
Why do we have a district representative and how can we feel empowered to even see change like within where we live, our community?
Oh my gosh. Yes. Okay, listen, American democracy is exceptional. People will hear that and then be like, oh my gosh, you're one of them. And I don't even care what category that means you put me in. Yeah. I don't care. Like our democracy is amazing. And it functions because it is so, like ultimately it is so local. And we get so stuck on these like big national conversations and big issues, you know, and worry so much about like national elections. And what affects your day-to-day life so much more is your city council person. Like they're elected by the people, depending where you live, but by the people of your neighborhood.
Yeah.
If you have like wards. to represent you to the city. So when you call, they are responsive. I mean, there's very few representatives I know who really are like just not responsive to their constituents. And the higher up you go, the less responsive they have to be. So if you call your U.S. senator for something, like, you know, keep in mind they represent your entire state. So like probably not going to be the fastest way to go. Sometimes it can be. I'm not saying that to criticize any specific U.S. senator's office, but like, you know, they represent millions of people. But your city council person, depending on what city you're in, probably only represents like in a small town, 5,000 people. In a city like Columbus, like maybe a couple 100,000. But still, they care what you have to say, and they should care. Like that's their job.
Yeah.
So I worked as a legislative aide at the Ohio House of Representatives. So that's state government level. So the state, which some people don't know, but states have their own legislatures. So like we have U.S. Congress and Senate. There is also a state equivalent of a Congress and a Senate. Ours is the House of Representatives and the Ohio Senate. I think Nebraska is the one exception to that. They only have one legislative body. But I know, interesting, isn't it? But that means that these people represent a specific district, a specific area of the state. And so we would get calls from people about all kinds of things. Some of them were very funny.
What is the wildest thing somebody called in about?
Oh my gosh.
For you to like fix for them?
The most ridiculous legislative issue I ever got drawn into was there was a cockfighting ring that got broken up in Dayton, Ohio. And I worked for a representative from the Dayton area. Like cockfighting was already illegal, I think. But we were like increasing the penalties for it, maybe.
Okay.
Would you think that would be controversial?
No.
It was very controversial. All the people who raise chickens, and I assume it's for the purpose of fighting them, came out to testify about how we were like over-regulating the industry.
I would think it's kind of a like pretty majority consensus that like we're not going to be doing that.
Yes, you would think, but you would be wrong. And no one, to be clear, none of them came forward and were like, yes, I'm using my roosters for, it's roosters, not chickens, sorry, but roosters for, you know, fighting and betting money on them.
It's the fact that you wanted to.
Yes, it's the fact that they were like, but you're hurting my whatever. And it was not legitimate farmers coming forward and saying this. It was like, you know, just people who came out of the woodwork.
Oh my goodness.
But then there were lots of people who just called all the time because they had issues with their Medicaid. Or like food stamps is a really common one.
Yeah.
SNAP benefits. People would call because something was wrong with it. And like you knew exactly who to call as an aide.
So those are things as an aide that you could actually help with.
Yes.
And like be productive.
Yes.
And,
I knew like exactly who I needed to call at Department of Job and Family Services and say, hey, this person needs this. Here's all their info. Can you look into it? And they looked into it. I think people just don't know. You know, you're having an issue with like the BMV or whoever, like you just call your state representative. They are there to serve you.
How long did you work as a legislative aide?
4 years.
Do you feel like things that you learned or seeing the inner workings of local government, how has that affected the way you see like our government as a whole?
Yeah. Well, keeping government separate from politics, I think is part of it. So like knowing that there are just so many people who work in government who like their job is not to be political. Like they're not there to serve a party. They're there to like serve the public. And I mean, the vast majority are doing a great job. They're doing the best they can to serve the public, you know?
Yeah.
And when they're not, you read about it in the news. Like,
right.
They stole this money. They did this thing. Like they abused their power, you know? And so on the whole, I would say our system really is very like accountable. People, you know, people just say all kinds of things when they're like upset with our politics, especially.
Yeah.
And be like, oh, the government's all corrupt. Like our government is not corrupt. You know?
Yeah.
Like there are countries where like we complain about inflation here and it is a problem, but there are countries where their inflation is 100% in 6 months.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
That's a real problem.
Yeah.
Like 4% inflation, definitely difficult, but like it doesn't mean our government's corrupt.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So I think we sometimes just lack perspective of how good we have it. Our government is very stable. Like our cities and our counties and our states are very stable.
Yeah.
I do have probably more trust in the government than, you know, people who maybe don't have that experience. And there's lots of reasons for people to mistrust any institution. I mean, we've had a lot of moral failings that are very public, Yeah. But by and large, I feel like it's unfounded to just paint that brush across the whole of our government.
Yeah. There might be more Leslie Nopes out there than we think. Who are really just fighting for the people.
It's true. Yeah. There are. They exist,
So you really enjoyed those 4 years.
I really enjoyed it. And it wasn't just like the work, it was also the people.
Yeah.
Because everybody else who was a legislative aide was like also 20 something. And it was our first job.
What a time to be alive.
What a time to be alive. We went to happy hour like every night. We played softball teams together. Like it was so fun.
Yeah.
So fun. And I still like just really treasure those people.
Yeah. And then like where do you go from there?
So after that, the representative I worked for in my last year there, her name's Peggy Lehner. She's now the mayor of Kettering, Ohio. Shout out to Kettering.
Sorry, Kettering. I've never heard of you.
It's a really great suburb of Dayton.
Oh, okay.
And she is like a wonderful person. I love her. Awesome. I feel so grateful I got to work for her.
Yeah.
But she got me a job. So I was leaving because I decided I was going to do this internship at church because I was exploring doing ministry for a living instead. And so I was going to take this internship and I was like, great, it's part-time. It pays like nothing. I guess I'll just get a job at Starbucks also. But instead, Peggy got me an interview for a part-time job at Ohio Right to Life, like a pro-life advocacy organization. I was like, oh, I didn't know that was like even a possibility. And so I went and interviewed for that and I got that job, which paid way more than Starbucks and was super fun. It was in 2009. So going into the 2010 elections.
Oh, wow.
And this is when politics was still fun to me.
Yeah.
It was just awesome. Fun to get to do like part-time work and do campaign stuff that like felt really great. And at the time, being pro-life was not a super partisan thing. So that was really fun for me too, because it was like figuring out messaging from a Democratic point of view and a Republican point of view.
Yeah.
And it was really fun.
So how long did you do that job?
I did that, for like a year and a half, I think. And then I moved into the role of being legislative director at Ohio Right to Life.
Fancy.
It does sound fancy. It just means I was a lobbyist for them. And so then I got to like actually work on advocating for legislation.
Wow.
Which was really fun. Again, when politics was fun for me.
Yeah.
The way lobbying should work is that you are there on behalf of a certain group of constituents, whether it's a trade association or like cancer survivors, like it could be anything, Girl Scouts. Like you're there on behalf of some group of people, right? Some group of people has engaged you to be their representative, to go talk to your representatives. And how that should work is that you are persuading them on the merits of your issue and saying, here's why this would be good. Here's how things are now. Here's how they could be better if we pass this law. And this is what we should do. And then that representative who decides to sponsor that bill should be persuading their colleagues of the same. And that is how it should function. But also because our politics has sort of become so toxic, it's like seeped into that process too in a way that is really unhelpful, where you see bills being held up because it's not helpful to a certain political candidate, and that happens at the congressional level and that happens at the state level. Like we've seen it in both. Yeah. And I won't give concrete examples only because I'm not trying to throw specific people under the bus, but like they're not hard to find and they do make the news, you know, and that is so disheartening. Like, how is anything ever going to change if we are operating like this? So it goes back to what you said earlier, like young people have all this energy and this expectation that things will change because they should change, because nothing can ever stay the same. Right.
Yeah.
Like that's not how the world works. We're like in this position where our major political parties are trying to force things to stay the same because it's helpful to their elections, to their campaigns. And that is counterproductive and not sustainable in any way.
Sounds encouraging.
It's not encouraging. But again, all the ones who are out there, all the elected officials who are out there doing the right thing, you're just not hearing about them.
Yeah.
You know?
When you look back, do you ever feel like these different versions of yourself that they would like play nice together or like that they would be friends? You know what I mean? Like, do they feel like it's always at the core, it's always been you? Or do you feel like the seasons are so drastic? It's kind of like, what was I doing?
Yeah. What a good question. I feel like for the most part, I feel like all of it has just been me. Mm-hmm. I do think though, in the last 4 years, so I left Ohio Right to Life in 2020 over just a really strong moral conviction about things that were happening and the ways that like Ohio Right to Life is meant to be, their mission statement is that they promote and defend the dignity of human life from conception to natural death is the rest of it. But human dignity is central to it. And because the political lines were drawn the way that they were, there were other human dignity issues that we were not speaking out about that felt really important to me.
Yeah.
And part of it at the time was Black Lives Matter. Part of it was immigration. There were just different things.
Yeah.
And it was a me problem, not an Ohio Right to Life problem. But I was like, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like this is not, I can't like fully be myself and I can't fully advocate for things I want to advocate for.
Sure.
If I stay here. So I have to go. And so I did. And that was really hard. And in the time since then, I do feel like I have changed a lot as a person. I still feel like I would probably do all the same things, like if I went back to that position, but it was a different time before 2020.
Yeah.
Which is so crazy to say because it's only 2024, you know?
Right.
But like 2018 Steph could not have foreseen the things that were going to happen in 2020.
Yeah.
Even without a pandemic.
Yeah.
You know? So it's not a helpful exercise, I think, for me to be like, oh, would I have done this thing differently or that thing differently? Sure. Like, I did my best for what I knew at the time to be true, you know?
For sure.
And now I think I just see things so differently because I'm outside of it. Like I've stepped out of that world. And I also just feel like I don't have a need to tolerate a lot of the things I felt like I just needed to tolerate before. Like you just had to deal with the reality you were given.
Yeah.
Right. So you were lobbying in the specific conditions you were lobbying in.
Right.
And today I could not go into some of those meetings.
Right.
And just tolerate those things. Because I don't have time for that in my life, I've decided.
Yeah.
You know? And I know I'm very lucky to be in the position I'm in. Where like financially it's okay for me not to be working and for me to be doing the things I'm doing. Like we have to sacrifice things, but that's okay.
Yeah.
But also I'm just so glad that I don't have to sit there and just pretend like some of the things are okay that I don't think are okay.
Yeah.
So for the last 4 years, what I've really like dove into has been my own spiritual formation. And by that, I just mean like what I am allowing to form me as a person and having intentional practices to make myself the person I want to be. You know what I mean? Or to like put boundaries even around like the person I want to be. And so for me, like being someone who was always super informed, super up on political news. Like I used to be on Twitter all the time. Like that was just how I got all my news. And, you know, it was my job literally to respond to whatever the crisis of the day was. Like it was
like on Twitter? Or like
to give a public comment on like, you know, if something happened in the political realm that affected the organization I represented.
Yeah.
Like I had to give a comment on it. You know, you get a phone call like, hey, what do you think about this thing? And like, you'd have to have a comment.
Wow.
Because if you didn't.
That sounds like a lot of pressure.
It was really fun, to be honest.
Oh, okay.
Like, I really like thinking on my feet. Like, it was fun to be like, oh, okay. And like,
so there's people like you out there.
And I wasn't winging all of it by myself. Like, I had staff. Like, you know, we had people who like had input on things. But like, oh man, I really enjoyed it. All that to say, I had to like really rewire my brain from that. You know, the political world and my job really rewarded like not just like quick thinking, but like sound bites. Not just do you have a response, but can you give a really good response and one that simultaneously shuts down the other side and makes you look good, you know? And I got pretty good at it. And that actually makes me feel very sad now because of what the cost of that is to my soul.
Yeah.
You know, Because you do begin to sort of dehumanize other people when you do that. Like you are dehumanizing whoever the other side is.
Yeah.
You are trying to say, even if you're not saying it directly, that they are somehow less worthy or less smart or worse people, you know? And that does hurt my heart a lot to think about now. And I had to like deprogram myself from that.
Yeah.
I mean, that was just how my brain became wired. And I think that's how a lot of people are, judging from my Twitter feed, which is still the same. I'm not on there very much, but when I go back, I'm like, oh, this is why I don't check this, you know?
Yeah.
And so I've had to be really intentional. Like I do not check social media every day. I just don't. Like, because when I do, I feel anxious. Like I can feel my anxiety rising. Even when it's like pretty tame, like a tame day on social media.
Yeah.
You know, someone is always like virtue signaling something that makes you feel bad because you're not, you know, then do I have to post something about that? Like, no, you don't. The truth is you do not, you know?
Yeah.
But it's like this weird pressure that says that you do and that who you are online is really who you are. And it's not. Like, it's not even real. It is social media. So I have just had to learn to value face-to-face interaction so much more, even when that means people might make assumptions about me that are wrong. I am okay with letting those sit. But a few years ago, I would not have been. I would have felt like I needed to correct them or I needed them to know like I was on the right side or whatever. And now like I can choose not to care and it's okay. It doesn't mean I don't care about that person.
Yeah.
It just means I don't have to care all the time about how other people perceive me. And it's so much easier to live that way.
Yeah.
You know?
But you don't want to look like someone who doesn't care about all the things.
Sure.
That just feels tough.
I mean, yes, I agree. But also like, who does it matter to you how it looks? You know? Like you get to decide. Brene Brown in one of her books, I want to say it's Dare to Lead, but I'm not sure, has this really great exercise where you take a 1-inch square piece of paper that is very small.
Yeah.
And you write down the names of everyone.
I think it is Dare to Lead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whose opinion you care about.
Yeah.
Like the people who are your people. Like if I'm worried about something, who do I go to? Who can I talk to? Right.
Yeah.
Like who would I be, who would it upset me to know that they thought less of me because of something I said or did, right? And you have to fit it on a 1-inch square. And that's the whole list, you know?
Yeah.
It's not my 1,500 friends on Facebook.
Right.
It's a 1-inch square piece of paper that fits like at best maybe 10 names if I write really, really tiny.
Yeah.
And those are the people I care about. And so like, do those people who know me and love me and are regularly in contact with me or are part of my community or my family, like, do they think less of me because I didn't post about this thing? Probably not, you know?
Yeah.
Like they care about you as a whole, as a person. And so I think a lot of it is like just being okay with that, learning to be okay with that, understand that and be okay with it and not like, it's almost like we all feel like we have to live our lives like a celebrity and we don't. I can walk out of my house in sweatpants and it doesn't matter, right? Like I don't care. And no one else should either.
Really, yeah.
And I feel like a lot of it is just guarding your own heart and your soul. And like you get to set those boundaries, you know, like what matters to you and what doesn't. And so like when I go on social media now, I often think like, you know, had I not read this post by this person, I would never know they thought this way. And the next time I saw them, I would just be like, hey, how are your kids? But because I read this post, now the next time I see them, I'm like judging something about them.
Yeah.
Because I either really agree or disagree with them, right? Yeah. And I don't want that knowledge. I want to just run into someone I haven't seen in 10 years and be like, how are your kids? You know? Because that's what I care about.
Yeah.
Like, I don't care what their politics are or what their like causes are or whatever. Like if it comes up in conversation, great. Like I'd love to hear, I'd love to talk about it, you know?
Yeah.
But like, it's not the first thing I would ask, just like it's not the first thing I'd ask what your job was, you know? Like, I don't really care.
Yeah.
How are you doing?
Yeah.
So great to see you, you know?
Yeah.
So I think for me, like it really is about how I'm able to show up for people.
We talked about earlier how since you're a kid, you wanted to change the world.
Mm-hmm.
And there has been this thing in your heart that says, I want to be a part of that call to action. You had shared with me a while back this idea of being an activist versus being an advocate.
Yeah.
Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah. I think, when I was younger, I definitely had more of that activist bent of like, oh, is there a protest? I think I'll go. Like, oh, is there something else we could be doing? Should we be writing our congressman? Like, great, I'll do that, or I'll wear the bracelet for this cause, or I'll post this thing on social media or whatever. But advocacy is not that. Advocacy is more like what I was saying before about what lobbying should look like. And it's actually persuading people to change their view on something. Mm. And that takes so much more work. Mm. I'm not dismissing the activists among you listening. I get it. You want to go and you want to march and you want to make signs. And I have been there. And I'm not going to say right now that I'm never going to go to a protest or something again. I probably will,
Yeah.
But like the real work happens with advocacy because you're having actual conversations about what needs to change and how it needs to change and having to deal with disagreement.
Yeah.
Like in the moment.
Yeah.
And it's just a lot harder.
If there is someone listening who has something on their heart that they feel really passionate about, how would you encourage them to be a solid advocate for that thing?
Yeah. I just read this book with my oldest daughter. I read a lot of young adult fiction. I'm not afraid to confess that. But I just read this book with my older daughter, and it included this quote from Dolly Parton that I loved. And also I love Dolly Parton.
Dolly for president.
Yes. Not ashamed to support her either. And she said, find out who you are and then do that on purpose. Mm. And I just love that so much.
It's really powerful.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
Like what a simple statement. And I think, you can hear things like that. There have been past versions of me who would hear that and then be like,
yeah, okay.
What does that even mean, Dolly? Like, what do you mean? But now I feel like I am at a point where that is how I'm living. It's like when you finally are, I feel like I finally am like living as my whole self everywhere I go. You know what I mean? Whereas again, 4 or 5 years ago, me would have had maybe a more diminished version of myself going into a meeting because that's what I needed to do to persuade someone to do X, Y, or Z, right? As a lobbyist. And now I don't think I can do that. I think I can only show up as my whole self. And so whatever it is that you're like passionate about doing, just take your whole self into it wherever you go.
Yeah.
And it just comes out. Like the thing you're passionate about will just come out and you'll have so many interesting conversations for it.
If you could go back and talk to a past version of yourself and tell them something, anything, which life would you hop back to and what would you tell Stephanie?
Ooh. Okay. Well, I think the hardest one is what I've been thinking about more lately. And that is I would tell my 30-year-old self, who was then executive director of Ohio Right to Life, not that what I was doing was not worthwhile, but like to remember that like power is not the thing to seek if you want to change the world.
Wow.
And that could be for yourself. That could be for a cause. That could be for a candidate. Like those, I don't know, people in power do change the world. I'm not saying they can't, but like what is in your power to do is just whatever is right in front of you. And it feels so small and so frustrating and so like minuscule in the scheme of things. But really, that's the most we can ever expect of ourselves. I really think like I've just come to realize that like for real change to happen and for anything that is worth doing, like it's just going to be long, slow work. Like we so badly want things to be like this easy fix. We so badly want to be like, well, if the government would just do this thing, that would fix this problem. And it might fix something, but it doesn't fix everything. So just like starting somewhere.
Yeah.
And being willing to say like, I will do the long, slow work if this is what it takes.
It's really up to us, isn't it?
Yes. I mean, if that's our best, right?
Yeah.
The best we can do is what we can do.
Before we go, I want to talk a little bit about the really cool work you're doing with Value Life.
Oh, sure.
Can you tell me more about that?
Yes. So I run a ministry at our church, and it is a joy to do it, called Value Life. And so we help moms and babies, so pregnant moms or moms with, very little kids, with whatever they need to get themselves back on their feet.
Yeah.
So, I spent all these years working in Ohio Right to Life. I spent lots of years in government in various capacities, like worrying about infant mortality and all these things like childcare and whatever. And doing this ministry has like filled in color all these things I knew to be true in black and white, and when you actually get to just walk alongside a mom who's struggling, it really feels like joy to me to just enter into the circumstance she's in and be like, okay, I can't do everything, but I can do something for you, And so like becoming a parent is difficult. It's like a big transition in people's lives. A lot of the moms that I work with actually already have kids, so they know that part of it, but pretty much every single one has not come into their current pregnancy intentionally.
Yeah.
However that has happened. And almost all of them just completely lack support, or they are just too ashamed to ask for it from their family. Most often because it's, their third or fourth kid. And it's like, oh, I've done this multiple times now and I'm just too embarrassed to go back and face my parents. And, they've tapped out the resources they have. So their parents have helped them a ton, but like they just can't keep doing it. And to just be able to be like, hey, like I can give you a pack and play. Here, let's get you in a parenting class. Let's get you formula because you need formula. Let's make sure you have a breast pump so you can do that, Like they have so many layers of difficulties.
Yeah.
And I can only do so much. But again, like getting to just walk alongside them and like hear them out is precious.
Yeah.
It's amazing. And they work so hard. And what is so astonishing to me is like, these moms will come in. I don't know them from anywhere.
Sure.
They could come to me any number of ways, but I can sit down with them and it just feels like, yeah, you're a mom just like me, and they'll be like, gosh, I'm so overwhelmed. I don't know what's wrong with me. Like, I can't keep up with these things. I'm not like getting done all the things I want to be getting done. And I'm like, you're just a mom.
Yeah.
Like, yes, me too. Like you're not doing it wrong. You're not the problem.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's just, all what we actually do is just serve women who are in those situations. And again, they could come to us any number of ways.
Yeah. How do you even get connected with these women?
Yeah. Some of it is, they get referred to us from somewhere else. So Vineyard Columbus is another church locally. So we're at Life Vineyard Church. Vineyard Columbus is another church locally that has had this ministry for a really long time. So I literally just copied and pasted it from them, which was great. I didn't have to like learn how to set up all the things.
You didn't need to reinvent the wheel.
I did not. And they're like in a different area of the city than us. Right. So, there's women that we get to serve who, are a 15-minute drive from our church, but it would be a 40-minute drive for them to get to where Vineyard Columbus is, So some of it is just like that. Vineyard Columbus is like, hey, this person reached out. Can you serve them?
Yeah.
They're way closer to you. Great. Done. We've gotten a couple referrals from other food pantries that are nearby. We have done a lot as a church in the community in recent years. And so I've just been able to meet a lot of women that way. So there's just lots of ways that they come to us.
That's
but
so cool.
Yeah, once they come, I basically just ask, what they need. Like, how can we serve you? What do you need? And sometimes it's really specific and they know exactly what they need. And sometimes, I may only meet with them once or twice and that's that. But other moms I've gotten to just like be friends with.
That's so cool.
I mean, they feel like they're just mom friends to me.
Yeah.
But they live in different parts of the city and I don't know, some of them just really need like ongoing support from a friend.
Yeah.
Because being a mom is very vulnerable and very isolating or it can be. And sometimes they just need someone else to listen. And so they just don't feel quite so alone, you know?
If there's anyone listening who thinks, hey, Value Life sounds really cool. I either know someone who could benefit, I could benefit, or I want to get involved in something like that, where could you point them?
Oh, you can go to the website of Life Vineyard Church, which is lifevineyardchurch.com. And if you click on ministries, there's a drop down for Value Life. And I believe there's an email address there, but if there's not, I'll just give it to you now. It's just valuelifecolumbus@gmail.com.
Steph, thank you so much for spending time with me.
Yes, it's always a pleasure.
I love you so much. Thanks for sharing parts of your life and your journey.
Thanks for doing this podcast. I just want to say it's a really great idea, and I've really been enjoying it.
Oh, thanks, Steph. Hey, friends, thanks so much for being here and being a part of this conversation. If you'd like to learn more about Value Life or how to get connected with Steph Krider, feel free to check out the show notes for links and information. I hope you join us again as we continue to share the stories of the lives we've lived.